Good evening and welcome everyone, residents, candidates, and INCO members. I'd like to welcome you to tonight's special INCO meeting and to our candidate forum. With that, Adam, could you take a roll call, please?
Yes, Chair. Bartolo Square North, Alice Madrid. Blackstock North, Nancy Rand. Blackstock South, Christopher Bissonette. Bryce Canyon North, John Hike. Cabrillo, Doug Bartello. Cal Geisler, Elizabeth Garcia. Thank you. Cal Geisler, Elizabeth Garcia. Carriage Square, Lynn Schulman. Channel Islands, Tom McAnally. College Estates, John Beck. Diamond Bar, Dennis Ralph. East Village, Ronald Arejo.
Here.
El Rio West, Daniel Ryberg. 5 Points Northeast, Pat Brown. Fremont North, Chris Taccone. Fremont South, Jaime Moreno. Hobson Park East, Jack Villa.
Here.
Hobson Park West, Cecilia Arvalo. Hollywood by the Sea, Michelle Carrillo. Kamala Parkville Winter. La Colonia, Ramon Lopez. Lemonwood Eastmont, Joe Avalar. Marina West, Pat Haydet. Orchard Park, Diana Velzy.
Here.
Oxnard Dunes, Jessica Yoa. Oxnard Shores, Walt Hagadam. Pleasant Valley Estates, Rosanna Biggerstaff. Redwood, Carlos Quiros. Rio Lindo, Tim Gingras. River Park, Paul Sheneblin.
Here.
Rose Park, Alfonso Arroyo. Sierra, Edward Castillo. Seaview Estates, Scott Taylor. Sierra Linda, Sergio Garcia. South Bank, Bill Schallenberger. South Winds, Julie Pena. Tierra Vista, Jean-Paul Magallanes. Via Marina, Catherine King. Wagon Wheel, Amanda Meir. West Village, Michael Gleason, who's here in the back. Thank you, Michael. Wilson, Vice Chair James Reach. And Windsor North, Aaron Greer. Chair, we do not have a quorum. However, we can proceed.
Thank you. I'd like to move on to item B, Pledge of Allegiance. Jack, would you like to lead us?
Yes, so let's all rise. Your hand on your heart. Repeat after me.
Thank you. Statement of the presiding officer. If candidates participating in the forum choose to speak during public comment, they forfeit their 90-second opening statement during the candidates forum. Now we'll go on to public comments. Pursuant to Government Code Section 54954.3A, at a special meeting, a person may address the legislative body only on matters appearing on the agenda. The presiding officer will limit public comments to 3 minutes per speaker. Do we have anybody on the board to speak?
One speaker, Larry Stein.
Mr. Stein?
Speak from here. Speak from here. You can speak for me.
Good evening, members of the INCO. Thank you for the opportunity of being here. Members of the audience, I've been a member of the INCO in the past as a former president of the Lemonwood neighborhood 20 plus years ago. I've been involved with the INCO and city issues for over 30 years. I've been following city issues for over 30 years. Events took place in the last 6 months that I felt were unattainable for me to address the issues in a normal format. So I made a decision last July to run for council. I've run for city council maybe 7 times, mayor twice, treasurer once, city clerk once. I've never been elected, but many of the issues I bring forward do get adopted. So I am concerned the fact that some of the issues that I present before the INCO do not necessarily get addressed. because these issues concern all of us. A case in point, the city spends $14 million a year for providing water for the farmers. The residents ratepayers of Oxnard are paying for that water. $25 of your water bill is actually going towards debt service on something that we 40,000 people aren't getting the benefit of. I brought this issue up several times to the INCO in the past. And so the INCO should be making issues available so the public's aware of this. We have issues where we're building a $50 million flyover at Rice and Avenue because an accident took place in the fog. How many accidents have we had at Rice and Fifth Street in the last 10 years? Maybe one or two. How many accidents do we have on the corner of Gonzalez and Saviors? 4 or 5 times a year at least. So the city's going to spend we're going to spend $5 million to get $50 million for something that does not occur very often. I suggest the city relocates its resources, and the INCO should be involved in telling the city that some of its resources should be allocated for the benefit of the public, or the ratepayers and the citizens of Oxnard, and not for special interests. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Do we have anybody else that wishes to speak under public comments? Do we have anybody, Adam?
No, we do not, Ms. Felsie.
All right, thank you. Okay, with that, I'd like to introduce Ronald Arroyo, who will be our moderator for this evening, who will conduct the rest of the forum.
Thank you, Vice Chair Diana Belzi. Good evening, Oxnard residents and those watching at home. I'm Ronald Arroyo, a member of the Inter-Neighborhood Council Organization, INCO, and Chair of the East Village Neighborhood. I am your moderator for tonight. We are proud to present the candidates for Districts 1, 2, and 5 for Oxnard City Council, and we have all of them present with us tonight. The INCO of the City of Oxnard consists of the chairpersons and executive boards of Oxnard's 44 active neighborhood councils, all being volunteers, giving residents the opportunity to participate in governmental decision-making processes and serving as an advocacy group for each of the neighborhood councils. This forum is being hosted by the INCO. As an organization, it cannot and does not publicly support any candidate for political office. This is an opportunity for voters to hear directly from the candidates to get the information they need to make an informed choice when voting. We are glad that all are here to hear from our candidates, and we do hope that the voters get the information that they need. The rules of this forum have been previously communicated to the candidates as follows. Candidates will be given 90 seconds to present their opening and closing statements. Questions will be posed to a portion or all of the candidates, and each candidate will be given 60 seconds, time permitting, to answer each question. Candidates may have papers to refer to and/or to write down notes. Those who are hard of hearing and have previously informed the planning committee will receive a typed up copy of the question prior to their turn to answer. We will now begin with the opening statements from all candidates who did not speak during public comment of the meeting. The seating order was randomly drawn prior to this event. Please take note of the timer before you. The first candidate, Ms. Hartley, will start with their opening statement, followed by Councilman Tehran. You can now begin, Ms. Hartley.
I am known as a watchdog by keeping tabs on City Hall. My focus has been to prioritize goals to guide spending, and I am mindful that City Hall checkbook is your pocketbook. As the chair of the Oxnard INCO, I have used my leadership position to help build relationships with the community for safer neighborhoods, conduct meetings, host community safety events, and personally engage with residents. When I am not acting in my INCO chair capacity, I lead advocating for the community by mobilizing residents to speak out on issues that affect them. For example, when I informed the River Park residents that my opponent and the council unanimously increased their Melrose taxes, residents countered this and instead got a reduction. It's unfair that residents in a special district's community pay the Measure E tax and will not get the same benefits. I speak out when high-density housing does not reflect the needs of the city. I have brought more transparency to how Melrose taxes are managed and forced City Hall to conduct annual budget meetings with residents, something that was not in the past. My work doesn't end with River Park, and I will work just as hard to represent not just District 2, but the whole city. I will fight for solutions on housing, citywide impacts of homelessness, addressing the pension debt, proper use of special districts funds, and reasonable spending needs before wants.
Thank you, Ms. Hartley. Our next candidate is Councilman Tehran, followed by Mr. Perello. You can now begin, Councilman Tehran.
Thank you very much, Mr. Arvalo. I first want to thank the INCO for putting this together. As a former member of the INCO, I've done planning and coordination and pulling off of these candidate forums as well. I know it's a lot of work, so thank you. My name is Gabriel Tran. I'm currently the council member for District 2, and I was elected in last year's special election and appointed in February prior to that. And I do want to share that I am a former INCO member. I was a vice chair, and I was also neighborhood council chair, elected to 3 terms for the Fremont South Neighborhood Council, and formerly a Parks, Recreation, Community Services Commissioner. I stepped down from those roles when I became a council member because the bylaws do not allow you to do those roles. I'm a 20-year professional in behavioral, individual, and community health. I've directly served youth and families in challenged communities, including Oxnard. I've used my experience from my career to reach out to residents directly and connect them directly with staff prior to council and since being on council. I held a District 2 town hall meeting, which was a virtual one in the midst of COVID when I was appointed to council. All of the active residents or neighborhood councils participated with the exception of one. And I also held a River Park Town Hall meeting that was a hybrid meeting in person and virtual to get information out about their upcoming CFD assessment for the current fiscal year we're now in. I hope that I can impress on everybody that I'm going to continue the work I've done, and I'm going to continue to engage residents and staff to further the positive progress for our city. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilman Tehran. The next person is Mr. Perello, followed by Mr. Arvalo. Mr. Perello, you can begin.
Hi, my name is Doug Perello. My dad always told me, if you borrow something, return it in better condition than you found it. We have not had new leadership in District 1 for 9 years. Is Oxnard better after that 9 years, or is it not? If my dad saw a piece of trash on the ground, he'd tell me to pick it up. I say, I didn't put it there. He said, you see it, don't you? Now pick it up. Some of our current leaders and staff were not here when some mistakes were made, but we need to make sure that they are cleaning up those mistakes and not hiding them. We also need to make sure that we're not repeating the mistakes. We have secret LMD audits. We have HUD grants that are not in compliance. We have Amazon accounts that are overspent, and we have $323 million in pension debt. 9 years ago, it was 95 million. Now it's 320 million, 323 million. So we cannot just say that we have a balanced budget and pretend that that massive debt doesn't exist. I believe in true accountability. I believe in transparency and efficiency in government. On my role as city council, I'm not here to be a cheerleader. I'm here to be an effective leader. We need to provide leadership that addresses the problems of critical infrastructure and provides basic services like safety, roads and alleys. We need to make sure that our existing parks are in good condition, provide youth and senior services. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Mr. Perello. Mr. Arvalo is next, followed by Councilman Basua. Mr. Arvalo.
Good evening. My name is Chris Arvalo, and I'm a lifelong resident of Oxnard. I grew up on the south side of town behind McDonald's over on off of Saviors. I currently reside in North Oxnard, so I've seen Oxnard grow from the 1960s to today. I'm very proud to live here. I'm proud of the services that are provided. I'm proud of the police and the fire departments who worked through the pandemic, the city workers who work for Public Works, et cetera, all working through this pandemic that we're just passing through. I possess a BS in accounting. I'm an MBA, and I have also graduated from the USC Sol Price School of Public Policy Executive Development Program. So my professional background is 35 years in healthcare audit, finance and operations and ending up about 20 years in the C-suite. So thank you for this opportunity. I look forward to hearing from you.
Thank you, Mr. Arvalo. Next is Councilman Basua, followed by Councilman Perello. Councilwoman Basua, you can begin.
Thank you, Mr. Araujo. Good evening to everybody in the audience tonight, everybody watching on Zoom. And thank you to the INCO for hosting this forum. My name is Gabriela Basua, known to almost everybody as Gabby Basua. I have been humbled enough to serve the residents of District 5 for almost 4 years. A little bit about me. I am almost a 20-year public servant working for the city of Port Hueneme. I am the Director of Housing and Facility Maintenance. That experience in itself has allowed me to sit in the council and has allowed me to bring forward a lot of the things that is lacking in the south of Oxnard. Having been the first district representative and having the experience that is needed has allowed me to advocate for South Oxnard and their needs. I have so many accomplishments that we have accomplished over the 4 years, and I'm looking forward to this forum tonight. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilwoman Basua. Next is Councilman Perello, followed by Mr. Huerta.
Thank you very much. Would like to, number one, I would like to thank the members of the INCO chairs that have showed up to take the roll call. It's significant if you belong to an organization, you show up and do the work. It's not a criticism, it's just a fact, and facts and evidence matter. I am the city councilman for District 1. There was a comment made, are things better now than they were 9 years ago when I was approved for a council to fill in the slot in June of 13? The answer is yes. Those that cannot see the difference in what it is now from what it was, we're not paying attention. And there's a lot of people that don't pay attention until something happens in their life. They may retire and have time on their hands to look around, where before they didn't pay attention. I'm extremely proud of what's happened with the city of Oxnard. I'm extremely proud to have come from this specific organization in the South Bank neighborhood as a chair and worked myself up into this body and served as the chair. It wasn't all on my watch, but the translation booth in the back is a part of something that took place when I was the chair. Mr. Fisher, Ms. Garcia, and Mr. Castillo were all involved in making sure that there was an opportunity for those that are not comfortable in English, that can hear Spanish, that there's an opportunity that rests on my thing. I'm very proud of the accomplishments that have been done in the last 4 years in this city. There was an audit that was found because of an investigation and just how seriously wrong this was. Thank you for the time.
Thank you, Councilman Perello. Next up is Mr. Huerta, followed by Mr. Pena. Mr. Huerta, you can begin.
Yes, good afternoon.
Can you turn on your mic, please?
Sorry about that. Yes, my name is Eduardo Huerta. I'm actually running for District 1. I just want to introduce myself. My political background is consulting and running campaigns and creating change in communities. I recently highlighted a lot of change in the past year and a half with our city council members. My biggest objective is to really listen to our community, our residents, and all institutions around our city. I think with the past experience with our city council members in LA County, knowing that a lot of our political help came from staff members and actually assisted these city council members, I want to make sure that transparency is always adequate and clear when it comes down to dealing with our community members and our educational system, our neighborhood councils. And I want to make sure that you guys know that any answers you guys have, I'll always be very clear and honest with you guys. I will never do the runaround. I won't sit here and make excuses because I am a resident. I am part of you guys, and I really want to be part of the Community Service, Public and Safety and Housing Development Committee to really get down to the problem of our infrastructure. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Huerta. Mr. Pena, last but not least, you can begin.
Good afternoon, everyone. First of all, I'd like to thank the INCO for putting this forum together and all of our community members for coming out today. My name is Armando Pena. I am a resident of South Oxnard and one of the council candidates for District 5. I have had the privilege and honor to live in South Oxnard for the past 22 years, and my family has called it their home for over 30 years. I have seen what the abilities that South Oxnard has to entail in its community and the product of what one can be coming from South Oxnard. I have grown to love Oxnard and I'm proud to call it my city. It is something that I have always held very dear to me. I'm very passionate into revitalizing and continuing to shape Oxnard into something that it deserves and something that our community is looking forward to. I believe that being a leader means being a strong leader, providing transparency, most of all, being equitable to everyone. Creating an environment in which everybody feels like their voice is a new voice. Together, we can continue to climb and lift one another. Together, we can make a difference and continue to revitalize Oxnard. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Pena, and thank you all. Our first part of our forum will be by topic. Each topic will have 2 questions made to half of the candidates on the dais, and then the other half will have the second question. We're going to our first topic about sales tax measures that have passed previously in the city of Oxnard. The first person to answer the question will be Ms. Hartley, followed by Mr. Stein, Mr. Arvalo, Councilman Perello, and Mr. Pena. Yes, and just as a reminder, you have 60 seconds, 1 minute to answer this question. Measure O is a 20-year local half-cent sales tax approved by the voters in 2008 that provides locally controlled funding for protection, maintenance, and expansion of vital city services. Have expenditures approved by the City Council from Measure O funds been appropriately in the best interest of the city? Why or why not? What would you do to maintain or change the expenditures going forward? Ms. Hartley, the first question is up to you, followed by Mr. Stein. Ms.
Okay.
Hartley, you can begin.
I'm sorry, I'm still reading through the question.
Ms. Hartley, I'm gonna have to give you 5 seconds. The question is about Measure O. Please begin.
Okay, I'm sorry, I didn't, you started the timer when I was still reading? Okay, as for the expansion of vital services, I don't have specifics to be able to comment on what these, what Measure O has specifically gone towards. You know, I can't comment on this at this time.
Thank you, Ms. Hartley. The next question, the next person to reply is Mr. Stein. You can begin.
This measure, this 0.5% sales tax increase, was supposed to provide enhanced services to the community. Unfortunately, during this period of time, we had a great recession. The money was not used for enhanced services, but was used for backfilling existing services. Because enhanced services were not maintained, but jobs were kept. Current positions were kept. Current positions for public safety were kept. Park maintenance was being maintained, but we would not experience enhanced services for a number of years. Should the tax, we had another tax was passed later on, but again, what should have been done is that specific services should have been enacted to make it a special tax, so it could have been used for special services as a general fund. The state can use it any way it wants to.
Thank you, Mr. Stein. Your time is up. Mr. Arvalo, you're next, followed by Councilman Perello. Mr. Arvalo, you can begin.
Thank you. Measure E and Measure O are a great benefit to our city to increase revenue. And again, as Mr. Stein stated, expand service. The service, the complete budget for Measure O and potentially Measure E are online in the city website. And so if you'd like to know exactly what this was spent on, you can go there. Mostly positions is what I see, backfilling. The thing that I see here, the measures are a way to not directly impact citizens only of Oxnard, but those who come and shop here. I have a sister-in-law who lives in Malibu and they do their shopping here, so they can help offset, you know, those folks that come in and go to the collection and the movies and so forth can all help the wonderful city we have here offset our cost. In terms of fire and police, the fire and police and filling those positions can benefit the city by decreasing overtime.
Thank you, Mr.
Thank you.
Arvalo. Next is Councilman Perello, followed by Mr. Pena. Councilman Perello.
Thank you very much for the question. Mr. Stein's analysis is right on the button. There were promises made when Measure O was asked to be approved by the voters, and the promises included everything, including the kitchen sink. Money was spent for everything, including the kitchen sink, including employees. And as Measure N has come in, and now there's a threat to Measure O, there's an opportunity to try to bring the employees that are being paid for, were being paid for with Measure O into the general fund where they should have been all along. The improvements would be specifically on an issue that would come for a sales tax is to explain exactly what it will and won't do. Measure E did that. It's to enhance what we need. The funds go into the general fund to be used at the discretion of the council. And I believe that Measure E and Measure O are very worthwhile. But Mr. Stein was accurate. It was done for a lot of things because there were shortfalls and people decided to grab Measure O money and put people's salaries on there. If Measure O goes away, we would have to let those people go.
Thank you, Councilman Perello. Mr. Pena, you're last on this question. You can begin.
Do you mind repeating the question for me, please?
Yes. Have expenditures approved by the city council for Measure O been appropriately and in the best interest of the city? Why or why not? What would you do to maintain or change the expenditures going forward?
Okay, so I believe that Measure O was an allocation to help fund our streets, parks, community enhancement. It was a way of getting our community into a better place, expansion, bring revenue and services. I believe that city had to do what it needed in the moment in order to ensure that job security was something that was taken care of. And in doing so, it also brought into the enhancement of the community and bringing in how we can continue to contribute one another into making these differences and these changes. So I think it gave us the opportunity to continue to grow and develop.
Thank you, Mr. Pena. The second question on the same topic of sales tax measures will be answered by the remaining four, starting with Councilman Tehran, followed by Mr. Perello, Councilman Basua, and Mr. Huerta. Councilman Tehran, the second question is, Measure E is a 1.5 cent local sales tax passed by the voters in 2020 to provide for services like 911 safety medical response, financial recovery, and accountability, and does not expire. Has the city directed the first increments of funding from the measure appropriately and in the best interest of the city? Why or why not? What would you do to maintain or change the expenditures going forward? You can begin.
Thank you very much. Measure E, I've said it on the dais during public meetings in the past. We have to thank the voters immensely for trusting their local government enough to take on this additional sales tax. And initially, the first things you will see, as Councilman Perello alluded to earlier, are the improvements in our landscaping. If you think back to the 1920 fiscal year and the fiscal year following that, our medians, our parks, our trees were abysmal. And that was saying something beyond what they were already looking like prior to that. Measure E allowed us to now start getting those caught up, and they're looking amazing at this point. We've also been able to expand a number of services like recreation. And in River Park, my opponent stated that they're not getting any benefits from Measure E, but the reduction in their mellow roofs from last year wouldn't have happened if it weren't for Measure E when the fire station, the fire service was removed from that. So just know that if this is being spread out and used in ways that we would have never been able to do before.
Thank you, Councilman Tehran. The next person is Mr. Perello.
Yes, thank you for that question. I believe that Measure E was a ridiculous increase in sales tax. They doubled the sales tax. In 2008, we increased it by 0.5%. In 2020, they doubled it. Now, I'm not against the fact that we needed more money, but the problem is you cannot solve fiscal mismanagement by throwing more money at the problem. It's a regressive tax. It hurts lower income and middle income families more. They didn't gain the trust. People still think that it went for certain things. As Mr. Perello said, it's a general sales tax. They can use it for anything they want. Why do we need such a ridiculous sales tax? They're not spending our money wisely. Look, we're only 3 cities out of 482 with a city portion of 3%. How come Camarillo can still get along with 1%. And we need 3 times the amount of city portion of sales tax to do the same job as cities that are doing just fine with 1%. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Pertello. Councilman Basua, followed by Mr. Huerta. You can begin, Councilman Basua.
Without Measure E, the approval of Measure E, this city would continue to see the lawns not being mowed or streets not being paid. And I really, really want to make sure that the residents understand that this tax that was passed is passed for the enhancements and for the community. And it is up to the council to make sure that we are using those funds the best way possible. One thing that one of the candidates say is, why is Camarillo at 1%? Well, they have the outlets. We don't have outlets, people. We do not have the outlets that bring in the tax revenue. This is all tax revenue that is coming back to us, and we're putting them back on the streets. We're putting it in our lawns. We're going to be putting it in different areas throughout the city. So as long as the council is transparent and we understand budget, we will be okay.
Thank you, Councilman Basua. And last is Mr. Huerta.
So Measure E, on May 25th, there was the Parks and Recreation allocated sufficient funds on Measure E and Measure O on general funds to purchase and basic improvements to recreational green space. But before, this was before the budget and the last recent budget that was passed, we have to understand that any project, so that Measure E only covers communities that were part of the developments when they're paying their Melloroos and their sales taxes on their communities. And so they were promised amenities to cover certain maintenance issues. And so let's say this, a lot of our communities are left out when it comes down to Measure E. And so that's why we have Garcia's landscaping out there to actually clean up the mess and filling in the gap in our efficiency of not taking care of our parks. Another thing too is due to the already approved parks and projects through the CIP and the American Rescue Plan, there's no timeline associated with these future actions when it comes down to parks and future parks or any future establishments that we're actually adding on to these. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Huerta. Our next topic will be on homelessness and affordable housing. The first question will go first to Councilman Tehran, then Mr. Stein, Mr. Perello, Mr. Arvalo, and then Councilman Basua. Councilman Tehran, homelessness was cited by respondents in a recent Ventura County Star poll as one of the top issues for voters. What specific policies, if any, will you push for to decrease the incidence of homelessness? Please begin.
Thank you. A social issue like homelessness, there's no one thing we can do that's going to solve the issue. All we can do is address it, and we need to be multi-pronged in how we do it. Right now in the city of Oxnard, we have 110 bed shelter that is 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, 365 days a year. And we're now constructing a solution center just across the street here from City Hall, which will have that number, but it will also have showers, laundry, pet accommodations, housing, case management, 56 permanent supportive housing units above that in small units, and then on-site services for providers to be there in offices to work with the people who are trying to get off the street. We also have Casa Aliento, which has 70 units at the former Vagabond. We have homeless liaison officers who work day in and day out to provide services and resources and try and work with our homeless population. And then a good relationship with County HSA. And we have to continue the course on this and be multi-pronged in it in order to address it, because no one thing we do is going to solve it. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilman Tehran. Next will be Mr. Stein, followed by Mr. Perello. Mr. Stein, you can begin.
As stated by a previous speaker here, there's no one solution to homelessness situation. It's estimated we have over 2,000 people that are homeless. Some have issues with their mental health. Some have issues that are drug related, and some people have economic issues. The one thing the city can do is become a larger landlord, both with homelessness and with other similar issues. People cannot afford to pay $2,000 a month in rent when they get $1,000 in Social Security. The city needs to become a larger landlord and develop properties that the city owns and maintains. People cannot afford higher rent. That's a fact, Jack. We need to be more economic responsible to the community and become a landlord with a larger sense. 2,000 residential structures to small housing can possibly be a solution. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Stein. Next will be Mr. Partello, followed by Mr. Arvalo. Mr. Partello.
Yes, homelessness is an issue that's very close to my heart. I've done thousands of hours of outreach to the homeless. I've been involved in this issue for a long time. I understand it well. As Mr. Stein said, it's a very complex issue, but what we're doing is we're putting all our eggs in an extremely expensive basket. $40 million solution center that only houses about 1/10 of the population of homeless people that we have in our community, and it leaves 90% of them out in the cold. All this does is support the homeless industrial complex. People are getting rich off of homelessness while the suffering continues. It is crazy. It's ridiculous. We need to do something that's more cost effective and more effective. I think when they put these plans together, they forgot to ask the homeless people. They don't want this. They don't want to be in dormitory style, locked up together for all night in there. A tiny home village, a sanctioned encampment, we can bring many more people in out of the cold, and it's more palatable to the homeless. If you're going to do something for the homeless and spend that much money, you got to do what they want.
Thank you, Mr. Partello. Mr. Arvalo, you're next, followed by Councilman Basua last. Mr. Arvalo, you can begin.
Thank you. Thank you for the question. I do want to say that the city is very forward in addressing housing, and we have 1,700 Section 8 vouchers that the city currently manages. So these are the starts, and we have 520 low-income units. So it's not like the city of Oxnard is not addressing this. There is a total housing plan also available online, and if you'd like, you can educate yourself there and see what's already going on. The prior two folks that answered the question about homelessness were right on. Mental health is a key issue. Working with the county is a key issue. Getting the folks out of the cold and keeping our community safe is paramount. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Arvalo. Councilwoman Basua, you're last, and you can begin now.
Thank you. There is really no one solution to homelessness. Everybody is so unique in what they require. But one thing we've got to do better is we've got to start with our youth. We've got to do outreach to our youth in order for them to continue to grow as the adults that this community needs. So, but in regards to homelessness and itself, the city is definitely on the right step. I understand that not everyone is as happy as can be, but we are really trying. We are even trying to get something in the south end. Every part of the city has this problem, every single corner. So we are doing the best that we can, and I will continue to support the homeless services.
Thank you, Councilman Basua. Our second question on this topic of homelessness and affordable housing will first go to Councilman Perello, followed by Mr. Huerta, Mr. Pena, and then Ms. Hartley. Councilman Perello, the lack of affordable housing is one of many reasons that people may become homeless. What specific policies, if any, will you push for to increase affordable housing? You can begin. Thank you.
Thank you for the question. With respect to the affordable housing issue, we need to work with our neighbors. We need to have our neighbors in the more trendy Tony. As my opponent complains about Camarillo is so much better. They need to provide more services for their people so that the homeless in that area stay there. Most homeless people stay in the area that they know. The homeless people are here in Oxnard. The city of Oxnard, again, as my opponent has said, spends $40 million. He didn't say it that way, but he said it that way the other night. But the implication when he talks $40 million, it's the city spending 40. He's wrong. There's a lot of different ways to say somebody's wrong. The city is spending $1 million on the affordable housing issue because of SOAR. The ability to build homes depends on private money, whether it's private money or nonprofits. The city of Oxnard is not in the business of building homes. And with the housing and the cost of housing and what's going on in Oxnard, the housing is needing to go up.
Thank you, Councilman Perello. Next is Mr. Huerta, followed by Mr. Pena. Mr. Huerta, you can begin.
My solution for our housing, it would be working with our nonprofits and working with a lot of city-owned undeveloped property and trying to find a way where we can actually do a lot of senior housing where we can actually downsize our seniors into lower housing, making it more affordable for them to live in and their cost of living, and actually securing our workforce system. I think it's very important that we think about our seniors and our, obviously our communities. A lot of seniors do own a lot of property, and people are pretty much, the economy is changing. They can't afford it. So I figured if we find some type of housing programs where we can actually use their existing properties for our housing crisis, where we can actually find families to live in their properties and then find solutions for them with institutions to maybe advance ourselves and develop senior housing, and then to sell it properties in advance. And so give these seniors an opportunity to really grow in our community and really secure themselves for their retirement. I think it's important that a lot of us have kids that go to school. And thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Huerta. Mr. Pena, you're next, followed by Ms. Hartley. Mr. Pena, you can begin.
Yeah, so in order to help the lack of affordability in housing, it begins by focusing on reducing the administrative regulations and barriers that are being a barrier into the different zonings of lands in what can be developed. That means the amount of resource that is available to our homeless population. It also means partnering with government-funded nonprofit organizations to help and support them, reducing the administrative and regulatory barriers, as I mentioned, and just supporting an initiative function to develop and move on to different goals to establish a cost-effective plan that will help long-term, not only help these individuals become working members into the community again, but continue to serve them as an avenue or an outlet. You're providing them the guidance and the necessary resources in order for them to better themselves for our community and continue to contribute in the way that we do now. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Pena. Last is Ms. Hartley. You can begin.
We need to stop focusing on new development at the north end of the city that is attractive to people outside of our city, such as coming in from Orange County, San Francisco. This does not leave affordable housing for people that live here and support our local economy. We also need to get creative with grants by adding ADUs, transition commercial buildings into artist lofts and container tiny homes, and more, unfortunately, more high-density housing would help the situation.
Thank you, Ms. Hartley. Our next topic will be about city management. The first question will first go to Mr. Stein, then Mr. Arvalo, Councilman Perello, Mr. Pena, and then Ms. Hartley last. Mr. Stein, the city council ultimately hires and fires the city manager, the only city employee in which they have that power. Do you believe that our current city manager, Mr. Alex Nguyen, is doing a sufficient job for the city? What is at least one reason that he is or is not? You can begin.
Thank you very much. One advantage that we have with our current city manager is stability. He's been here more than 3 years. That's a good thing. Some of the actions he's taken to me have been questionable. For example, we still have a high turnover in senior management. How often do we turn over our traffic engineer? How often we turn over our people in development? We have a very, very high turnover in that direction. While he has made some suggestions of financial responsibility, there have also been shortfalls. Again, one of the issues has been our water program. We're supposed to have built wells 12 years ago to provide water for 42,000 people. The wells have not been built. The wells have not passed the state tests. On the other hand, he's not pushing he's not following on the issues of public works and providing the resources. We have an increase in our sales tax of $35 million, but we're going to spend $65 million on a pool.
Thank you, Mr. Stein. Your time is up. Mr. Arvalo, you're next, followed by Councilman Perello. Mr. Arvalo, you can begin.
Thank you for the question. In relation to the city manager, I believe he's doing a great job. In preparation for this meeting, I researched the most recent ACFR, which is the Annual Comprehensive Financial Report. Beautiful. Gives all the detail you need to run the city. And if we weren't there and didn't have this document, you wouldn't be making the decisions we are. We want to pay down the debt. So where do we focus on? This report and our CFO have done a tremendous job, and I want to commend them. In terms of, I'll call him Alex because I don't want to mispronounce his last name. But I just met him a couple of weeks back. You know, he's very unassuming, he's very humble, and I just see him as a citizen of Oxnard. And that's it. I don't have anything else for you.
Thank you, Mr. Arvalo. Next is Councilman Perello, followed by Mr. Pena. Councilman Perello, you can begin.
Thank you very much. I think that our city manager is doing a tremendous job. My experience with the city and paying attention to what's going on started when my wife brought me to this council, 1998. Before that, I didn't pay that much attention. The managers and the staff that had been leading the city from that time couldn't carry this city manager's water. That's a hard statement, but it's a fact. This city manager came on board when the city was facing insolvency. The city manager brought in professional staff, Mr. Riper. They brought us out of the financial train wreck that we were in to now the fantastic financial situation we're in. The turnover that was mentioned, there are some departments that are getting a tremendous amount of pressure, and these people are good and they're getting offered jobs in other areas. There's no law that handcuffs the people to stay working here. The Ormond Beach power plant and the money that the city manager was able to, no other staff, no other elected, no other member of the public came up with a plan to generate $25 million to pay for the remediation. We've had balanced budgets. The city manager.
Thank you, Councilman Perello. Mr. Pena, you will be next, last by Ms. Hartley. Mr. Pena, you can begin.
Like many of the candidates have already stated, I believe that the city manager has been doing a great job. I think that when elected into a position, you have to constantly remind yourself that you were elected by these individuals to lead them by example, and also to provide them transparency. I believe that the city manager has provided transparency and has also been active in the community in answering any questions and being available to them. I think that that is really what defines the leader, and I think he has been doing great at that. So like many of the candidates have stated, I would agree with them. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Pena. Last is Ms. Hartley. You can begin.
Okay, I believe our city manager could be doing a better job. We lost our elected treasurer and there was no oversight for spending. For example, the $50,000 Amazon overspent, and then we had to extend it another $50,000. There's a massive pension debt. That is not a balanced budget. We are facing, and we are also looking at funding an aquatic center. We don't have the funds for that. I don't see him retracting some of these things. We need to prioritize spending, and I do not think he's going in the right direction.
Thank you, Ms. Hartley. The second question on city management will first go to Mr. Huerta, followed by Councilman Tehran, Mr. Perello, and last by Councilman Basua. Mr. Huerta, a July 2022 Ventura County Star article reports that Oxnard's unfunded liability makes up approximately 28% of Oxnard's pension debt and needs $1.12 billion to fully fund retiree benefits. Should the city lay off personnel, issue a bond, a combination of both, or something else? Mr. Huerta, you can begin.
Before you've been laying off any employees, I think we should just reevaluate and evaluate everybody's position in the city. I think it's important that we value every staff member at this current time. When it comes down to, can you please repeat the question? Sorry about that.
We have unfunded liabilities. What would you do?
I don't have an answer for that. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Huerta. Mr. Huerta. Next is Councilman Tehran, followed by Mr. Perello. Councilman Tehran, you can begin.
Thank you. I do want to point out that the unfunded liability is not unique to the city of Oxnard. This is a statewide and nationwide issue that, especially in the state of California, is magnified. Our $323 million that you see thrown out there, when we look at what that debt service is going to look like in the future, if we were to do a bond, there's the ability to pay that off over time, or pay that off and then work through that as time goes on here, knowing that we could refinance that in the future if interest rates are looking better. And this is not me committing to that, because it may be a vote that comes to council in the near future, but just stating what our professionals have stated around it. We're addressing this given the options that are provided by actual financial professionals. And I have to say that my financial background is based on my government work. And an example of like the $50,000 over Amazon, that just shows me people don't know how blanket POs work. And that's the purpose of those. But this debt service, the bond that we're looking at is an option of many, and we'll be evaluating those. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilman Tehran. Next is Mr. Perello, last by Councilman Basua. Mr. Perello, you can begin.
Yes, the debt service on these bonds and they're growing more and more bonds. The primary problem is we're giving away things that we don't have the chips on the table. When we go into those negotiations with these unions and these MOUs, we are offering them money that we don't have. We are going far beyond the revenue sources to really pay for what we're promising. We're promising what we don't have, and we need to stop that. We need to renegotiate so that we are actually providing a safety service and the other services for the city that we can actually afford. There's money in with revenue and there's money out. And with $328 million in unfunded pension debt, we are obviously offering much more than we can afford. Somebody's going to get a haircut. It's either going to be the public with more taxes, or it's going to be folks that are going to lose their job because they have to cut back. That's not safety that we need. We need to get a handle on this, and we need to really start renegotiating a better, stronger position.
Thank you, Mr. Perello. Please, no hand claps from the audience. Councilman Basua, you're last to answer this question. Thank you.
Thank you. This is kind of what I really enjoy as far as the finances and in city government. Unfunded liabilities, it is an area where we do not have enough money to pay what our obligation is going to be in the future. So with that being said, we are not unique, not in this city, not in this state, not in this nation. Every single city has an unfounded liability. So I don't want people to leave here and think that we are unique. We are not unique, but this is where budgeting comes into play. It's not necessarily about our current employees, because there are things as council members that we can do now in order to curb and have that liability come down in time. And the city has already started to take steps in that. And you can see that in our labor negotiations. Our CalPERS liability is being lowered.
Thank you, Councilwoman Basua. We'll move on to our fourth topic on priorities. The first question will be going to Mr. Perello, then Mr. Arvalo, Councilman Basua, Councilman Perello, and then Mr. Huerta. Mr. Perello, although a rare occurrence, if you were granted $1 million to do as you please for Oxnard, what are the top 3 areas of the city budget that you would fund and why? You can begin.
Well, $1 million sounds like a lot of money to the average citizen. So with only $1 million, it would definitely be for the homeless. I would create a sanctioned encampment, tiny home villages. I wouldn't spend $40 million in wherever it's coming from. I didn't state that that 40 million came from Oxnard. That came from taxpayers' household budgets. So the $1 million, I would create a sanctioned encampment. I would create a tiny home village. We got to think outside of the box. We got to bring more people in out from the cold. We can't keep funding the homeless industrial complex. $1 million will go so far to bring so many people in out of the cold. We can do the tiny home villages for temporary shelter for folks. We can do a sanctioned encampment. We can get them off the street. We need to have a citywide ordinance that says no illegal camping, bring these people out of the cold and give them more shelter and more access to services. $1 million, I could put in a lot more people out of the cold than 110 for temporary shelter with $40 million.
Thank you, Mr. Perello. Next is Mr. Arvalo, followed by Councilman Basua. Mr. Arvalo, you can begin.
Thank you for the question. My focus, police, fire, and water, regardless. Our community and the safety and the atmosphere of this city, safe and clean. I do want to take my time to go back and talk about the pension. The pension that you're seeing being placed out there, put out there, is a change in accounting standards for government. And you can't just put what you want there anymore. It's got to be developed by an actuary and then placed on your balance sheet or your income statement. We don't have an income statement, but that's the reason you're seeing this discussion or hearing this discussion about pensions. That's it. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Arvalo. Next is Councilman Basua, followed by Councilman Perello.
Thank you.
Councilman Basua.
Thank you. $1 million. What would I do? It's not a lot of money. nowadays. So one of the things that is really dear to my heart is our families, our children. I would like to spend that $1 million. If I had $1 million, I would like to spend it on our children. I would like to spend it on maybe education classes, sport classes, anything that had to do with our youth. When our aquatic center is open, providing those lessons for our children that do not know how to swim, because we really, really lack that ability in our city. So that is where I would put my $1 million.
Thank you, Councilman Basua. Councilman Perello, followed by Mr. Huerta.
Thank you very much. Ever since I got involved in this stuff, health, safety, and welfare has been the biggest thing. And currently if you're paying attention to the news, and I hope all of you are, I take the $1 million and put it into IT security. With what's happened in the airports recently, what happened in the LA Unified School District, what's happened with outside sources hacking into our system, what could happen to any entity, the county, the city, the school district, locally, the disaster that could happen because of potentially not having enough security would be much more harmful than $1 million spent on something else. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilman Perello. Last will be Mr. Huerta.
If I would get $1 million, I would actually allocate it with seniors, our senior centers. I think a lot of us have seniors at home, and I think it'd be a nice resource to actually have senior centers and donate some of that money so they can have activities, projects, trips, and also just, it's always good to keep a senior busy. I live with seniors. It's hard to keep them busy, and it's hard to work and take care of somebody at home. So I think a lot of our family members need that assistance. So having a senior facilities that will be like a adult care center better than our Entre Amigos, where you actually can really, really take some responsibility medically, physically, and emotionally for our seniors and our parents. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Huerta. The second question on priorities, unfortunately, is on the negative side. On the opposite, if unfortunately you were forced to cut costs by $500,000 and have no option to increase revenues, what are the top 2 areas of the city budget that you would decrease and why? The first question will go to Mr. Pena, followed by Ms. Hartley, Councilman Tehran, and Mr. Stein. Mr. Pena, you can answer now.
Thank you for that question. I think, like many, it's a difficult question, but when you are in an elected position, you have to sometimes make difficult decisions. We have to prioritize what our priorities are first in the council, in the city, what the city's needs are. And once we establish that, then focus on what we would cut. If we absolutely had to cut something, I believe I would look at the 5-year city plan and priorities. We have the quality of life, economic development, public safety, infrastructure, and organization. I would say we would have to cut on the development of new infrastructures. I think that focusing on what needs the immediate attention is the important part and not the future developments. So allocating first by focusing on what we need rather than what we don't.
Thank you, Mr. Pena. Next will be Ms. Hartley, followed by Councilman Tehran. Ms. Hartley.
Okay, so if we were forced to cut by 500,000, this would not even be an option. We have a Measure E tax that we implemented. Funds should be coming from there. That's simple.
Thank you, Ms. Hartley. Councilman Tehran, followed by Mr. Stein. Councilman Tehran, you can begin.
I will agree that we should never be in a situation again where we are having to cut services as we did in the 1920 fiscal year. However, we're speaking hypothetically here, and I had to go along with the question. I would look at, $500,000. If we look at our community festivals, there's actually opportunity to partner with community agencies who could offset that cost and either absorb that or work with us on in-kind services to still provide festivals on some level or some degree. And that would not have us cut into other core services. What I would not cut in my time remaining is recreation or cultural services, as we had to do drastically over the last 5 years prior to 1920 fiscal year. And I will say that in prevention programming, as my fellow candidates up here have said, it's key for our youth. And that's where I've spent all of my career. The figure is for every $1 you spend in prevention, you could save $7 to $13 later on down the line in ancillary costs like the juvenile justice system or the healthcare system. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilman Tehran. Last to answer this question will be Mr. Stein.
The first thing I would do is see how many budget positions we have that are unfilled. For example, in the police department, we may have a number of unfilled police officer positions that are budgeted but not filled. So that'd be the first place I'd look at. The departments have the highest number of employees at unbudgeted positions. The average cost of a uniformed police officer fully budgeted is $150,000. So cutting 4 police officer positions that are budgeted but not filled would come up with $600,000, which meet the goal of $500,000. So that's the first place I would look at. The second place is still the same philosophy. Look at budget positions and determine which departments have the highest number of employees that would have a less significant cost. For example, if you have a department that has 3 employees, cutting out 1 position would have a dramatic effect on that department. You cut a department that has 450 employees, 2 employees, 3 employees won't be noticed.
Thank you, Mr. Stein. Our next topic will be about specific city council policies passed or debated on in the past, recent. The first question will go to Mr. Arvalo, followed by Councilman Perello, Mr. Pina, Ms. Hartley, and then Mr. Stein. Mr. Arvalo, the city council adopted rent stabilization and tenant protection ordinances in April of this year. If you were on council, how would you vote and why would you have voted that way? You can begin.
I would vote yay, in favor. And the reason why is to augment the housing program and decrease or eliminate or avoid homelessness. That's it.
Thank you, Mr. Arvalo. Next is Councilman Perello, followed by Mr. Pina.
I was on council. I supported the concept, but I didn't support going to the 4% increase. And the reason for that is the developers and the individuals that own apartments, so we say farm workers that have been able to scrape money together, it's not enough to increase any improvement on their project. And we currently now are having residents that own properties looking to unload those properties because they cannot maintain them with the rent increase.
Thank you, Councilman Perello. Next will be Mr. Pina, followed by Ms. Hartley. Mr. Pina.
I would be also in favor of that, simply because it was needed at the time and it was a form of helping our community get back on their feet and have the access necessary that they needed in order to continue living day by day and have a quality of life.
Thank you, Mr. Pina. Next is Ms. Hartley, followed by Mr. Stein last.
Okay,
Ms.
I am
Hartley.
not in favor of rent control. There is assistance for housing, however, insufficient programs for property owners. So aside from potential dramatic Melrose increase, HOA, there's quite a few other expenditures that fall on a property owner, and we do not have enough support for them. Now, however, I am in favor of targeted programs that will help low income, the agriculture community, students and seniors. And with targeted programs, you can be able to transition them off as time passes.
Thank you, Ms. Hartley. Last to answer this question is Mr. Stein.
The issue is, who are going to hurt the most? The investor or the investee? The fact of the matter is that there are many people that can't afford the high rents that they have. The city has not done a full job in providing assistance to people who cannot afford the rents. We do have Section 8 vouchers, but Section 8 vouchers are dwindling. So to answer the question, I'd probably vote against the rent increase because it would not help the people who need it. I would rather see action towards helping the owners of the properties so they can attract and maintain their properties. A 4% rent increase is nothing. The cost of construction and maintenance is going up. I would rather have action taken and discussion taken on how to help the landlords maintain their properties as rising construction costs are going up. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Mr. Stein. Our second question on specific city council policies will first go to Councilman Tehran, then Mr. Partello, Councilwoman Basua, and then Mr. Huerta. Councilman Tehran, a resolution declaring Oxnard becoming a right to choose sanctuary city urging state and federal governments to make access to safe abortions a constitutional right, and opposing laws and regulations that threaten reproductive freedoms and rights was passed by the City Council this past July. If you are on City Council, how did you vote on them and why? If you weren't on council, would you have voted for them and why? Councilman Tehran, you can begin.
Thank you. That's a very important issue. And I know folks might have seen this as not a city issue. I respectfully disagree. This is an issue that affects everybody in a community. Women's rights and access to reproductive health care. How is that coming into question? I appreciated all the people who came out and spoke on either side of that issue. In the end, my vote on this dais was an absolute yes in support of that, because all the words I said here that night still stick with what I put out there. But without any question, when it comes to access to basic healthcare and basic healthcare rights, we should be, as leaders in this community, ensuring that that is made clear that we support that and that that is accessible to all people in this community, not just women, but people who are accessing gender affirming care, those who can access all the services that are offered by those clinics or by those providers. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilman Tehran. Next is Mr. Perello, followed by Councilman Basua. Mr. Perello.
Yes, thank you for that question. I feel it was extremely inappropriate for that to be an agendized item for the city council. This legislative body has no legislative action on that issue. Those are issues for state and federal. Our Supreme Court has spoken. This is nothing that we can do. This is just some kind of, proclamation that has no meaning, nothing that our body here as a legislative body can address or change regarding that issue. It's extremely divisive in our community. We are further dividing our community by this divisive topic. To bring it to city council is extremely inappropriate. It never should have been brought before city council, because that's not an issue that we will vote upon and take legislative action that will have any impact whatsoever on that issue, other than further dividing the community on a divisive issue that has nothing to do with what this legislative body is doing. To run a city has nothing to do with abortion.
Thank you, Mr. Perello. Councilman Basua, followed by Mr. Huerta. Please, Councilman Basua, you can begin.
Thank you. I unfortunately was not present during this vote. I had other obligations that had already been pre-scheduled, but my colleagues voted, and I will support their decision. We as human beings do not have a right to tell somebody else how to live their life, nor do we have a right to judge each other. Those judgments need to be left for that person. We have no business judging or telling people how to live their life. So that's my stance. And even though I understand it's a very divided issue, I'm glad that we were able to have that come present. But my stance is that as humans, we just don't have the right to judge each other or determine what's best for each other.
Thank you, Councilman Basua. Last to answer this question is Mr. Huerta.
Well, I'm a representative of the LGBTQ community. And so I just want to say that it's a very tough issue for me, because at the end, due to my sexual preference, I can't have a kid. I could adopt a kid, but I don't know what it is to have a kid in my womb, and I can't make a decision over somebody's life. But at the same time, I am Catholic, and I do support the decision of the voter. I mean, I think everybody has the right over their own body, but at the same time, I am Catholic and I have different views on that. But at the same time, like I said, I'm part of the LGBTQ community, and I think it's a mental health issue that should be assessed. I think that when it comes down to making those decisions, I think it's a tough decision for somebody to make. I've been affected personally by somebody in my family that took a decision. And I think it's hard. It's hard to actually see somebody regret making that decision, and knowing that you love that person and you can't no longer see that child because a decision was made when it wasn't appropriate. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Huerta. And that concludes our topic portion of the forum. Our next section will be based on districts. And we will start with first one question each to District 1, 2, and 5, and then rotate along as time permits. District 1's question will first go to Mr. Arvalo, followed by Mr. Huerta, Mr. Partello, and then Councilman Perello. Mr. Arvalo, residents along the beach are concerned with rising sea level. Does the city have a role to mitigate these effects? If so, what have you done or what will you do to help the residents deal with the rising sea level? Mr. Arvalo, you can begin.
Rising sea level is a symptom of global warming. And so the city can't diminish the heat, but we can support the residents. Currently, there's an issue with seawalls out at the harbor. And the city is involved in supporting the community of Mandalay Bay with repairs. Also, recently has come up that the water in the back channel of Mandalay Bay has become stagnant due to the decrease or shut off of the pump in the back. It used to be Edison and a cooling pump that used to allow the water to flow through. I would like the opportunity to work with the citizens of Mandalay Bay, City of Oxnard, to see if there's another solution, a lower volume pump that would get that water through and not put us on the evening news for a bad community situation.
Thank you, Mr. Arvalo. Next will be Mr. Huerta, followed by Mr. Partello. Mr. Huerta.
Can you repeat the question, please?
Yes. Does the city have a role to mitigate the effects of rising sea levels? If so, what have you done or what will you do in the future?
I would actually talk to residents. I know that a lot of the residents were affected due to raising water and deterioration of the foundations due to the Sea Bridge area. So I think it's just talking to residents and finding how these areas were developed and finding a way that we can prevent the rising sea level deteriorating our foundations to our properties. I think that's probably the best thing I can probably do. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Huerta. Following will be Mr. Partello with Councilman Perello ending this question. Mr. Partello, please begin.
Yes, the issue of climate change and global warming is affecting the entire world. Oxnard's not alone with that. There's nothing that Oxnard can do alone. We've got to work with all the agencies, partners, and determine what our role is in addressing that issue of if we have rising sea levels, then that's not something Oxnard alone can solve. But what we need to do is have a very strong advocate for the needs of our residents and speaking with all the stakeholders, all the agencies, state, federal, the Corps of Engineers, and determine what needs to happen. We need to have an analysis of the problem and know exactly what we can anticipate in terms of maintaining the safety of our residents and their residencies. So it's not just Oxnard, but what we need to do is we need to be a better partner with all the stakeholders and give strong input for our residents so that their needs are addressed and they have an advocate on their side to address these problems.
Thank you, Mr. Partello. Lastly will be Councilman Perello. Your time starts now.
The question was, what is the city of Oxnard doing because of sea level rise? The issue of sea level rise, I'm sure the common sense in this room would understand, you're not going to build a wall to hold back the Pacific Ocean. I do believe that there is climate change. The sea level rise and what the city of Oxnard is doing, they're making people address the current standards of building conditions. And if anybody will take a drive on Mandalay Beach Road, you will see the people that slipped under the deadline have built raised foundations. The homes are not being built, but they built it so that they get the permit in and they get to take piggyback on what was there in place. What I've done personally on this, I've tried to make the residents in that area on the coast in Oxnard aware. Some neighborhood chairs are very instrumental in sharing information. Some don't do a good job. It's a fact of life. The second is I've brought FEMA in to have meetings with those residents. Some attend, some don't. They will wake up when they get ability. They do not get the ability to get flood insurance because there's not a wall, again, that holds back the Pacific Ocean.
Thank you, Councilman Perello. Our next question will go to the candidates for District 2. The first will go to Ms. Hartley, followed by Councilman Tehran. Ms. Hartley, the first question is to you. Some current and neighboring residents have concerns with the residential and commercial growth in the River Park neighborhood. Are their concerns valid or unsubstantiated? Please begin.
Yes, they're valid. River Park currently have a lack of parking. So starting off with the commercial area, when people attend events, it spills out into the neighborhood. So most of those residents don't even have access to their own homes within a short distance. There has also been very little outreach when I have tried to work with a gentleman from Shea Properties to address the activity that comes, the late night activity. So they are declining to work with me to help address some of the safety issues with cars speeding through the neighborhood. The neighbors don't, the residents do not invite that activity. The collection does, and they don't want to get involved to help add additional flock cameras, which is something I added to the community that would catch late night activity.
Thank you, Ms. Hartley. Lastly, will be Councilman Tehran. Your time starts now.
Repeat the question, please.
Certainly, some current and neighboring residents have concerns with the residential and commercial growth in the River Park neighborhood. Are their concerns valid or unsubstantiated?
Thank you. I will say that for residential commercial growth in River Park, we recently had the specific plan amendment come to us for River Park. I was the lone no vote on that. There was significant conversation around it. There were a number of issues that came to rise. And my biggest issue was around the minimal outreach that happened from the developers toward the community to discuss the item. And looking at River Park, how it was laid out, it dates back to the early 2000s and long before I was on council, but certainly something I have to deal with today. And looking at what we can do to improve things based on what is built, we've taken input from the neighborhood council, from residents to work on things such as painting curbs red, adding new markings. There's looking at traffic flow, such as new stop signs, which is something people are asking about. But what can we do to improve things that are there now, to improve things based on what people are asking? Thanks.
Thank you, Councilman Tehran. Our next question will go to District 5 candidates, and the first will go to Councilwoman Basua, followed by Mr. Pina, and then Mr. Stein. Councilwoman Basua, the first question is to you. Do you support the decision of the City Council to appropriate additional funds for the construction of the Aquatic Center in South Oxnard? If no, why not? If yes, should Council have put up less or more money? Your time begins now.
Wow. Loaded question, considering I'm one of the ones that kind of brought the aquatic center idea forward to our city management. I grew up in South Oxnard, have lived in the south of Oxnard my entire life. My parents could not afford swimming lessons because we were that poor. And the ability for our children to learn to swim is something that they deserve. I continuously hear, we don't need it, we don't need it. Well, guess what? Ventura has one. Camarillo has two. Thousand Oaks has them. But what makes us so unique that we don't deserve one? Our community deserves it, needs it. I will continue to support it. I am looking forward for groundbreaking. And so in general, my answer is yes, I support it 100%.
Thank you, Councilwoman Basua. Next will be Mr. Pina, followed by Mr. Stein. Mr. Pina.
Yes, I think that the Aquatic Center definitely sounds like a great idea for the youth and the involvement of them. But I also think that the city needs to focus on the improvements that the city currently needs in order to improve that quality of life and be able to target our youth. We can't target our youth by bringing in a new infrastructure while we're still lacking the resources on different improvements that our city needs. It's not saying that it's completely against it or that I'm completely against it. It's just the allocation of it right now at this time, I think can be used in better resources of infrastructure and ensuring public safety as in streetlights in our neighborhoods. That is a big priority. So it would be the focus on what is really needed other than what can be used in the future. Because although it would be a great improvement, a lot of our high schools are getting those pools and they are open to the public.
Thank you, Mr. Pina. Lastly, will be Mr. Stein. Your time starts now.
In the year 2000, I was the president or chairman of the Linwood Neighborhood Council. I was also on the executive board of the INCO and was a participant as a representative of the INCO, the College Park Master Plan. We suggested having a pool built back then. And we were told a pool would be built when funds became available. In 2005, funds became available, the pool did not go in place. So I've been an advocate for a pool at College Park for 22 plus years. I think $60 million for a pool is unreasonable. Aquatic Center for $10 million is reasonable. The city approved funding or talked about funding for the Aquatic Center for $14 million last year. To going from $14 million to $63 million is undeserving of the citizens of Oxnard. I was a member of Waterproofing Kids too.
Thank you, Mr. Stein. And that will be the first round of questions by district. Questions will be posed again to the districts, first by 2, then 5, and lastly 1. District 2's question will first go to Councilman Tehran, followed by Ms. Hartley. Councilman Tehran, the first question is to you. District 2 is arguably the fastest growing of all the council districts because of both the River Park and Wagon Wheel neighborhoods. Can and should have been or could have done to provide more affordable units. Please begin.
Thank you. I certainly don't want to be an armchair council member and criticizing what was done before. Looking forward, we absolutely should be looking at our inclusionary ordinance to consider increasing the minimum percentage of affordable units that are required of developers if they want to come and do business in the city of Oxnard. That relates to the question earlier that I did not get around affordable housing. But in order to make this more affordable for people, in order to avoid what has been criticized of out-of-towners coming and moving to Oxnard, we want to make this affordable to people to move into these newer developments from the city of Oxnard. If we were to do that, the water, the traffic, that's a no net gain because it's people in the city moving to these areas that are being developed. But we need to make them more affordable and accessible to people, and increasing the housing stock and requiring affordable units be part of the development is the way that we can do it, or a way we can do it. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilman Tehran. Last will be Ms. Hartley. Your time starts now.
Okay. Yes, more should have been done to address the issue. So as these developments are starting to be put up, before that process began, we should have had an identified amount of what these units are going to cost rather than once they're built. Because as you know, in the process, you'll be able to address the issue early on, who these units will be available to.
Thank you, Ms. Hartley. District 5 question will first go to Mr. Pena, followed by Mr. Stein, and then Councilwoman Besua. Mr. Pena, the first question is to you. Just last month, members of the community learned that the EPA was doing a feasibility study to decide how to clean up Ormond Beach still after all this time. Why has it taken so long? Should the city spend funds to clean it? What are you going to do to clean it up? Please begin.
I think that it begins by educating our community on what Ormond Beach is. I think many of our community members aren't even aware of the jewel that Ormond Beach is. So starting by focusing on how are we going to inform our community on it. Secondly, it would be focusing on teaming up with different organizations and partnerships that will help us clean and revitalize Ormond Beach. It's also about making it it can help us and bring in revenue to our city in the sense of it being an attraction. Not just essentially as like a place where people will go hang out and have it be a sort of a dumping ground, but instead be something that you look forward to. And it's been known to be a hidden jewel of Oxnard. South Oxnard is grateful to have it on their side. And it begins with us making a difference and changing it into revitalizing it into what it really is and protecting the species there.
Thank you, Mr. Pena. Next will be Mr. Stein, followed by Councilman Besua. Mr. Stein.
I've been following Oxnard issues since the 1990s. My primary focus has not been on Ormond Beach because other groups like Larry and Sharon Godwin and the Saviors Roll and Desire team have been focused on this for almost as much time as I've been focusing on other issues. So one of the things that came up at the meeting that was held 3 weeks ago, sponsored by the EPA, was the toxic smoke that comes off of the radioactive waste site. The actual radioactivity is relatively low. It's apparently not harmful. The smoke coming in from that is. The concern, what can the city do? The city can do very, very little. This is a federal site under cleanup. The city's been following this issue for 20 years, has not done anything. The fact that the EPA is now taking action, taking concern, has probably been the results of one person, one city council member, Brian McDonald. He's been very involved in this issue. So again, the city's been involved in this, but the city cannot spend any money on this.
Thank you, Mr. Stein. Last will be Councilman Basua. Your time starts now.
Thank you. We did have a community meeting for those present or not present. The toxic side is very, very, very minimal. The EPA basically said that you would have to spend months. I mean, it's just very, very minimal, the impact of it. It is privately owned. It is not owned by the city. It is on schedule. It's on some schedule from the EPA to get cleaned up. But again, it is not as harmful as everybody had thought. And because it is privately owned, we have to be patient with the EPA and allow them to get their studies done and do the remediation that is needed. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilman Basua. District 1's question will first go to Mr. Huerta, followed by Mr. Partello, Councilman Perello, and then Mr. Arvalo. Mr. Huerta, the first question to you. Oxnard Airport used to have regular commercial flights. Do you support making an effort to bring commercial flights back to Oxnard? Please begin.
Yes, I currently do support having commercial flights. I think it's a good way of relieving traffic between the coast, and also that used to be a big part of my childhood. I used to have an uncle flying from Chicago once a year and then flying from Chicago to the LA airport. And it was always nice to actually pick up a family member locally. At the same time, you have Avis budget that used to be there, and then you had was it the Red Baron restaurant downstairs? So it'd be nice to kind of conserve our airport and sort of bring back the history. I mean, we used to have a lot of the air shows as well. That was a big part of our community as well. So I think just conserving that history. I mean, I think the aviation industry and the history and the classes and a lot of families that do take advantage of our airport. I think these are the people that we should think, especially in my district. I know there's a lot of members in my community that actually take advantage of the airport. So I think I would support the airport staying.
Thank you, Mr. Huerta. Next will be Mr. Partello, followed by Councilman Perello. Mr. Partello.
Yes, thank you for that question. I think first, before we start considering commercial flights out of Oxnard Airport, I think we need to do a study for the noise and for the environmental impact. And also, we're doing a lot of development planning for right around the airport. We have the Teal Club specific plan that's going to be proposed. It's on the track to have the Teal Club specific plan. We have the Portino project on the other side of the airport. Right now, we're not having commercial. We have a real problem with all the flight schools and the touch and go flights. It's been affecting the beach residents tremendously with the noise. There's a possibility of lead poisoning. So I think before we take that step, we really need to look at what we're doing already now in terms of these potential developments in the area and how that might impact those plans. And then to have commercial flights, we really need to know what is the need for it. Is it the need match the cost and the other impact to the local residents?
Thank you, Mr. Partello. Following will be Councilman Perello with Mr. Arvalo ending this question. Councilman Perello, please begin.
Thank you. Your question was, do I support the commercial flights at the city of Oxnard, the Oxnard Airport? An explanation. I serve on the Oxnard Airport Authority for Ventura County Airport Authority. The city of Camarillo has a sweetheart deal that they cannot have commercial flights. So if there are any commercial flights that will come into the county of Ventura, Oxnard is the only option. And because of that, I would support commercial flights into Oxnard. The touch and go issue is a big issue at the current time. Too many residents do not understand that when the planes get the tires off the ground, the airport authority has nothing to do with it. It's an FAA ruling. There is an accommodation being made to teach people and request that they abide by the rules and what they call fly polite. where it does not impact the residents as much as it does. But the basic question you asked, commercial flights, yes, I support if there's commercial flights, Oxnard, because Camarillo is too big of a dog in the house and they have been able to stop any commercial activity.
Thank you, Councilman Perello. Last will be Mr. Arvalo. Your time starts now.
Thank you. Thank you for the question. For me, it depends. Depends on the circumstances. What are the costs to the city? What are the concessions that we give up to engage that service here? Timing and cost of the flights. Is it economical? And I have flown out of Oxnard. It takes a little longer to fly out and go to Santa Barbara and go back to LA and get off the plane than it does to drive. So I'm just putting that out there. If the conditions are right, I'm all for it. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Arvalo. And that concludes our district-specific questions section. Our last main section will be, since we have incumbents from all three districts, it's going to be question to the incumbents and question to the challengers. The first question will first go to the incumbents of District 1, Councilman Perello, then District 2, Councilman Tehran, and lastly, District 5, Councilwoman Basua. Councilman Perello, what are two specific reasons that you should be re-elected?
Thank you for the opportunity to answer that question. I believe my track record has earned the trust of the public that I serve, not just in District 1, but in the city of Oxnard. I want to continue the process that the city of Oxnard has gotten itself back into a financial situation where we are not the joke of the county. It's taken a lot of work and a lot of tremendous effort by a lot of good people that work for the city. If I can address some of the things with respect to the management came into the city and they created a sunshine rule where the public is finding out what's going on with the meetings much more in advance than previously. The management created the private partnership with the PAC and the golf course to make them viable, financially viable. They also brought in a private operator. The management was able to entice Amazon to come back and create jobs after Amazon left. This is all the management, and this is something that the management needs support of the entire council, and they have been getting it.
Thank you, Councilman Perello. Councilman Tehran, same question.
Thank you very much. Two very specific reasons. Number one, I've brought a new blood to the table and high engagement of residents in a way that I don't believe this council has seen in the past. In being intentional about giving people the information and where they can find the information on what's happening in their city. We have engaged new people in the constituency to see what's going on, come to council meetings, comment, send written comments. And I believe that I have added to that. In fact, if you look at the monthly reports from our green team for 311 reports, District 2 has been the highest of 311 reports over the last couple of months. And I believe that is from people using the system because of engaging people and letting them know about it. Lastly are my three priority areas. One is to continue the restoration of our services. Two is reinvesting in our youth. And then the third one is equity for all citizens and residents in the city of Oxnard. And I will stand by those. I've done them since my appointment and will continue to do so.
Thank you, Councilman Tehran. Councilwoman Basua, again, same question.
Thank you. For years when I started this journey, my slogan was a new voice, a new direction for Oxnard. This time around, I'm using the slogan, your voice, an experienced voice. After hearing all the questions that have been asked about today, it's obvious that you need an experienced individual to sit in the seat and continue the work that we have started in District 5. A great example for that is the use of high school pools in order to serve our community. That doesn't work. It doesn't work because we have to share the pool with polo teams, swim teams. We can't use them during hours of operations. What our seniors wake up early. They want those swim classes. That is the kind of experience that I bring to the table. And I would love to continue to do the work that I have started. And that's it. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilwoman Basua, and to all the incumbents. The second question will go to all the challengers by district and then alphabetical order by last name. First in District 1 will be Mr. Arvalo, then Mr. Huerta, and lastly, Mr. Partello. Mr. Arvalo, what are two specific reasons why Councilman Perello should be replaced? Your time begins now.
Thank you for your question. You know, I didn't come here to throw rocks or lay blame. I came here to bring my experience, my education to this dais and to the city of Oxnard. So I'm not going to answer that question. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Arvalo. Mr. Huerta, same question.
Well, I came to council as a constituent and as a resident with certain concerns about infrastructure and city planning issues. And so I would expect the same respect that our council member expects for our constituents when we're out here in council is the same respect that I expect to give to my constituents. And so that's what I intend to do, is that I plan to really create and advocate change in our community and really get involved in our development areas. I know that Bert and Councilmember McDonald have been in council for the past 10 years. And so they could have taken a little bit more control infrastructure instead of blaming city managers. I think I'm not throwing rocks. I'm just saying it's really good to take responsibility for our community, because at the end, our community counts on us. At the end, we have like a lot of advocates for acknowledged and a lot of nonprofits for acknowledged. They did a lot of good work, but at the end, it takes families running through issues to really come to council meetings, advocate to create change and push to change. And I could honestly say advocating to Sacramento and finding some of my good friends that I work with to work with Gabe and the council was probably the best thing for the community.
Thank you, Mr. Huerta. Mr. Perello, again, same question.
Yes, thank you for that question. I really believe that there was a time when our council person for District 1 had a fire and he had a passion to really speak out and be a voice for the people. I think that's changed. I think that now we see 97% of the vote is in line with the other council members, where there's not any independent thinking anymore. It's just like to go along to get along. There's a rubber stamp voting. There's just, quid pro quo. There's just kind of this culture that I think needs to have an injection of a new vision, new blood, new perspectives. So when the council is voting 98% in lockstep, I think you really need to bring in some actual new vision and perspective. I believe that I can bring that. And I think that we've had a lack of proper representation for some time now.
Thank you, Mr. Perello. Next in District 2 will be to Ms. Hartley. What are two specific reasons why Councilman Tehran should be replaced? Ms. Hartley, your time is elapsing.
Oh, I didn't hear that.
Please begin.
No, I didn't hear it.
What are two specific reasons why Councilman Tehran should be replaced? Same as the other ones.
Okay, well, first I want to start by saying he has a lack of transparency. When it came to increasing River Park's millrates, the topic came to him twice, once at the Finance and Governance meeting and once again at the City Council. He was involved in multiple social media groups, and during neither of those, each time it came to him, he made no attempt to engage with the community. When they found out after the fact, that's when we came at the council and we were able to get a reduction. And when it comes to accountability, he is lacking it. In November of last year, a councilman sent out an email blasting to over 150 recipients, blasting a claimant that made an allegation about a HUD misuse, funds of misuse. And you know what, in that email, the councilman insinuated harassment when he said, "Would you stand by and say nothing?" The council has done nothing to address this.
Thank you, Ms. Hartley. Lastly, in District 5 will be Mr. Pena and then Mr. Stein. Mr. Pena, what are two specific reasons why Councilwoman Basua should be replaced?
So I, like many of my the candidates up here, do not want to throw anybody under the bus or bash on anyone. But I decided to run for city council because I believe that our community does have room for improvement. I believe that our community, despite the experience, needs somebody who is passionate and determined to work with the community directly, to understand and call out the issues that are happening in our community and make a difference. It's not about who you are or what you are. It's about what you can bring and that drive to change and be that start of your community. Be the seed that plants for the future. We are the future. And I believe that I am a young voice and a new voice, and I have the passion and determination. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Pena. Mr. Stein, same question.
There are two issues I wish to address since I'm limited to two. The first issue has to do with the city treasurer. In 2016, I ran for treasurer and lost to a better person. This went through a lot of cash and had very poor cash control. And later on, because of innuendos, the city treasurer's duties were stripped of his and is no longer able to do the duties he's supposed to do. I'd like to see those duties restored. I think the duties should have been restored, and Ms. Pursuant did not restore his duties. The second issue is having the city follow the law. The city continues to violate Prop 218, which is the issue of people being unfairly charged, subsidizing the cost of a different entity. So in this case, the potable water Peter are subsidizing the non-potable water payers and costing them large sums of money. The city is also not following with the Public Records Act. I got public record requests going back 90 days.
Thank you, Mr. Stein. Our last question, due to our limited time, I will ask for a 15-second response, but you'll understand why it's a little bit more informal and just a get to know you question candidate. Where is your favorite place to go in Oxnard and why? We'll start in the opposite order that we had. We'll start with Mr. Pena, ending with Ms. Hartley. Mr. Pena, 15 seconds.
My favorite part to go in Oxnard would be College Park. College Park is directly across from where I live. My family always tends to say that we're going to go to College Park and hang out and do all our gatherings there. It's the heart of Oxnard. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Pena. Mr. Huerta.
Oxnard Shores, I like hanging out at the beach, taking some time to myself, regrouping and just curing the ocean. I think it's beautiful. Our coast, I don't think we get appreciated as much as we have, and I think it's great to acknowledge that we're close to the water. I love the ocean.
Thank you, Mr. Huerta. Councilman Perello.
Believe it or not, the most favorite thing that I like in the city of Oxnard is driving around with my dog and trying to make 311 complaints in the various parts of the city of Oxnard.
Thank you, Councilman Perello. Councilwoman Basua.
My favorite place to go is to all the eateries in the South End. I can name a few. So, you have Jalisco's, and then if you take your food, you can go on to Ormond Beach and just kind of see the sunset go down.
Thank you, Councilwoman Basua. Mr. Arvalo.
Thanks for the question. I'm a resident of California Cove and a dog lover. I love to go to South Bank Park, my neighborhood.
Thank you, Mr. Arvalo. Mr. Perello.
Yes, now I like to go on the perimeter of my neighborhood. I spent 2 years full-time of sweat, blood, and tears, turning that from Sleepy Hollow when it had been so neglected that it's really nice now. Almost single-handedly, I transformed that neighborhood. So I like to walk my dogs there.
Thank you, Mr. Perello. Mr. Stein, 15 seconds.
Next to my backyard, I like spending a lot of time in downtown Oxnard. We have a lot of restaurants down there. I have people I see down there on a regular basis and enjoy the numerous restaurants downtown Oxnard. That's my favorite place to go other than my backyard.
Thank you, Mr. Stein. Councilman Tehran.
Thank you very much. Mr. Pena brought up parks, and as a former Parks and Rec commissioner, I learned to go to different parks every single time. They all have their own unique charm and their own needs, but they're all great. And my kids love to play on different playgrounds. So love all of our parks in the city. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilman Tehran. And last to Ms. Hartley.
Okay, I'm a foodie and I love to go to Montezuma's, take that food home and eat it. That's it.
That's great. Thank you very much, candidates. We will now begin the 90-second closing statements from all candidates in the reverse order of the opening statements. The first candidate, Mr. Pena, will start with their closing statement, followed by Mr. Huerta. You can now begin, Mr. Pena.
Once again, I would like to thank everyone who came out this evening, all of our community members, people joining us via Zoom, and as well as the INCO for putting this forum together. I would like to take this time and also bring up or touch upon that experience doesn't determine or shape a leader. I think that a leader is an individual who puts their constituents and their community before themselves. It's a person who continues to shape and revitalize its community for its future. It's about learning together and growing together. I want to encourage you to learn a little bit more about my platforms, a little bit more about me by visiting www.armandoforddistrict5.com. And I also want to remind everyone that together we can make a difference. That just as much as I have grown to love Oxnard, I want all of our community members, all of the youth to spark this initiative of change in our community. So I want to take that just all in. Thank you for the opportunity. And it has been very rewarding thus far, meeting my community, talking to my community, and being a part of my community. So thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Pina. Mr. Huerta, you are next.
First, I want to thank Gabe, Gabby, and Bert for all the attention well given to the community. You guys really did your part, even though we're out here fighting against each other and trying to find what's best for Oxnard and the great change that's up ahead. And I just want everybody to understand that it took a lot and great effort from a lot of people to really move this community forward. Even though we sound like we're all against each other, at the end, you guys are important. You guys are our community. You guys are our constituents. We count on your vote. So I just want you guys to understand that everything was done with great pride, great love for you guys and your families. And so I hope you guys take the opportunity to really read your handbooks, your props, find the best candidate for your community, your families. It can be me or it can be any of us out here. But at the end, it's your Oxnard, it's our city, it's our county, and it's our Gold Coast. And let's be proud of it. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Huerta. Councilman Perello.
Thank you again to the INCO. I've been very impressed with the amount of questions that you've been able to get off. But first, I would like to thank every candidate that's taken the opportunity and the challenge to enter the ring to combat for the seat that they wish to hold. The issues and the reason that I'm in this, it's to be representative of District 1. I'm on the ballot in District 1, but I'm also an Oxnard councilman. The big issues in District 1, there's a Santa Clara River levee called the SCR 3, protecting 6,000 homes from going into a flood zone. I want to make sure that that gets completed. There's the seawall issue in the harbor. I was advocating and was successful in getting $1.7 million to address that. Today, to our good fortune, the Ventura County Board of Supervisors approved another $1.3 million to match our funds for a total of $3 million to address. It's not going to fix it. It's going to be a big issue, but been successful doing that. I want to make sure that the financial situation, which is picked on by some candidates, that the city of Oxnard continues on the road that it is on. We're in very good financial shape. The Public Works Department, which I sit on the Public Works Committee with former council member Lopez and current mayor Zaragoza, is doing, in my opinion, a good job, as is the Public Works Department in the city of Oxnard. And again, the city's process of using 311. There are people that say that the employees don't do anything. If you look at the total tons of garbage and mattresses and refrigerators that are picked up and graffiti. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilman Perello. Councilwoman Pursuant.
Thank you. I also want to commend the INCO for having this forum, the people in the audience, people watching on Zoom, and everybody here tonight. It is not easy to be here tonight. So I commend you. Applause to all of you. I want to say that, experience does matter. If experience did not matter, I would not have been able to fight to keep Fire Station 2 when it was in the shopping block. I would not have been able to look at those financial statements if I did not have the experience. I would not have been able to champion the strongest tenant protection of any city between the Bay Area and Los Angeles if I did not have the experience. The Cypress neighborhood received the much needed street lighting improvements. So when we're talking about what my parents like to say, ganas, that is one thing they gave me, and that is for sure. The Diamond Bar neighborhood will get their wall fixed after almost 15, 20 years of it being down. Playgrounds at Pleasant Valley Park will be replaced. Bathrooms at College Estates and Pleasant Valley will be replaced. So if that is not ganas, I don't know what is. So experience does matter. If it wasn't for my experience, the amount of work that we have accomplished in District 5 would have not been possible.
Thank you, Councilwoman Pursuant. Mr. Arvalo.
Thank you for the question. I have to say, I'm happy for a more transparent government. And I keep on talking about the reports and the internet and the website for the city of Oxnard, because 10 years ago, that was not there. I'm talking about the annual comprehensive financial report that lists everything about the city and finance and would allow the city council to be more strategic in its reduction of debt or focus of limited resources. So there I am happy. I'm very pleased to see that. I do want to say thank you to the city employees, critical departments that survived and supported us through the pandemic. I also want to say that my platform is police, fire, and water. I want to maintain the response times for both police and fire, and maintain clean water, because you turn on that tap and you expect it to be there. Is it brown or is it clear? We own, as the citizens of Oxnard, a 3 utility resource, so we don't have to be held hostage by a water company somewhere else. So I'm happy for that. The treatment plant that we own currently operates at 35%. It was mentioned earlier that we can't really do anything on that water yet, but when the time comes, it's going to be there for our use. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Arvalo. Mr. Perello.
Yes, thank you very much for putting on this event. Thank you for all the candidates and incumbents for coming and being a part of the democratic process. I believe that there is a lack of transparency and true accountability. There's lots of talk of accountability and transparency, but I think we still have a long way to go to achieve it. Time and time again, it's been one citizen that stepped forward and challenged the illegality of certain acts that our city government here has done. If you look at the IUF case, 36.5 million got returned, and that person that was a whistleblower and he stood up and been a champion for the city was vilified. There is a vitriol and a hatred to opposing viewpoints. I think that we need to come together as all citizens and be open and honest about our problems and not be vilified or discussed in a certain way. Time and time again, there is no lack of transparency. The incumbent, he was a big, strong opponent for whistleblowers. Now he's calling out whistleblowers. So there's a real problem we have here. And if I have a difference of opinion or I see something different, I don't appreciate being called a liar from the dais when there's no supportive evidence. I don't think we need that. I don't think that helps us solve our problems. We can have differences of opinion, we can have differences of philosophy, but I think we need to do it in a respectful manner. And I don't think that's been done very well. I think we need to bring our citizens together to solve our problems and do it honestly and openly.
Thank you, Mr. Perello. Mr. Stein. No, you don't. It's 90 seconds. Please begin.
Thank you very much for the opportunity to be able to speak on this as a closing argument. We have a mantra in the city, open and transparent government. We have anything but an open and transparent government. We have a large number of people whose positions are in the budget, but not funded. Positions that are, we have budget positions that are funded, that are not filled. Where's the money going? Staying in the department, it's not being spent back to the general fund. I have public record requests outstanding for 90 days. We have a law that calls the Public Records Act, the documents are supposed to be made available in a certain period of time. The documents are not being made available. During the issue on the abortion, we had 300, 400 people here in the chambers talking about the abortion letter. 2 weeks prior, we had a budget hearing. There are 2 people in the audience on the budget. What's the priority? Your budget, your finances, or abortion? The abortion is an issue that is a personal issue. The budget issue affects everyone. We have not had an open and transparent government. We don't have a lawyer that works for the city. We have a lawyer that works for himself. It's my opinion that you need somebody who's going to stand up for you. I've been working for this, I've been working as a private citizen for 22 years. I want to make it 26.
Thank you, Mr. Stein. Councilman Tehran.
Thank you. Thank you for putting this together and thank you to all the other candidates. I just want to start with, I believe the difference between myself and my opponent is in demonstrated leadership. When I was a neighborhood council chair, items that came up that were important to my neighborhood, I was ahead of them. There was never an after the fact for me. I was paying attention to the agendas, making sure my residents knew about it, and we would speak at the first time it came up to council. Because that never happened with this item that was brought up earlier, that's why there was an after the fact. I don't know if she was asleep at the wheel or intentionally chose not to address it, but it still got addressed, and I'm happy that it got forward, and I learned from that how that I have to be more forthgoing, even though they had a chair in place, as the former chair now. I do want to say that I appreciate the opportunities that the city of Oxnard and this country have given to my family. My family came here looking for opportunity, and generations later, now I have been able to earn a master's degree in management and leadership and serve our community on the city council, and I'm honored to do so. And I believe it's my duty to continue to do that, whether I'm on council or not, and I will continue to serve our community. Lastly, I've been endorsed by our labor unions, by YIMBY, by CAUSE, by Planned Parenthood, by Senator Limon, Assemblymember Bennett, Supervisor Levere, Supervisor Lopez, trustees Karen Scher and Elizabeth Botello from the Oxnard Union High School District. These folks and these agencies and organizations have seen the work I do and believe that I can continue to make positive change in the city of Oxnard. And I hope to have your vote. And if you want to find out more about me, I'm at gabeteran.com. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilman Tehran. And last is Ms. Hartley.
Hi, I want to thank everyone on my colleagues for pulling this together and the audience for taking the time to get to know us. I intend to bring more fiscal responsibility to City Hall, increase transparency and enforce accountability, ultimately restoring faith in our local government. Without being more fiscally responsible, we will continue to watch funding for much needed services decrease and taxes increase. I also encourage everyone to please read the voter's guide. I am the only candidate in District 2 that gave every method possible to make contact and is on all my printed materials. I am accessible to every resident in the city because I understand that this is representing a district, but you have to work with everyone. You may reach me at ty4oxnard@gmail.com to talk about your concerns. And I want to address that while Councilman Tehran and I do have a difference of opinion how things are run on a neighborhood council, I cannot be expected to notify 2,500 residents for annual budget meetings. I'm a team of one. I would be honored to earn your support and represent you, and I look forward to an opportunity to serve as a District 2 elected official and continue moving Oxnard forward.
Thank you, Ms. Hartley, and thank you to all the candidates. Just to let you know, we did have a few more questions, and I'll just state them in case you want to just keep them in mind, that your fellow residents brought up. One is, what projects, if any, could you utilize with the Oxnard College to help further advancement in Oxnard? Other than River Park and Wagon Wheel neighborhoods, what policies or ideas will you do to improve the other neighborhoods in District 2? What is the most important reasons in picking a project in the Fisherman's Wharf? What is your future vision of the Carnegie Museum and Performing Arts Center? And what does diversity mean to you and how is it important? And so with that, I'd like again to thank all the candidates for participating in this forum. It takes an enormous amount of time and energy to run for office, not just for yourself, but also for your family, friends, and supporters. We thank you for taking part in maintaining our democracy. I would also like to thank the other members of the Planning Committee for their assistance in preparing for this forum. Len Schulman, Chair of the Carriage Square Neighborhood, Guido Goldner, Vice Chair of Carriage Square Neighborhood, and Christopher Taccone, INCO Vice Chair and Chair of Fremont North Neighborhood. Mr. Adam Smith with the City of Oxnard for Forum Logistics, and the INCO for hosting, and the City of Oxnard for the use of their council chambers. I would also like to take this personal privilege to personally thank all the candidates. As someone who has had some experience in your seat, I can tell you, no matter what happens on election day, it is a win for you. It is a win for your family, your community, your neighborhood, your district, and your city. Unfortunately, some offices in Ventura County didn't have any challengers and some didn't even have any candidates. And so it means something to say that we are involved with Oxnard, and you cannot deny that with this great competition that we have of ideas. We thank all the candidates for your time to speak to the voters. Good luck to you all and good night. Thank you.
Before I adjourn, I would also like to thank the activation, I'm not activation, I'm somewhere else, the INCO Forum Committee as well. Thank you, Ronald. You did a wonderful job tonight. And I also like to thank the participants. And with that, I'd like to adjourn.
Thank you. Thank you.